Guests, they come in our house every day, and they're trying to have an experience, right? And sometimes we fail in that experience, and it could be we didn't enforce a rule, we didn't give them hot food, our lines are too long. There's several things that happen that interrupt their day, and when they bring those to our attention, we have to show empathy and grace because we're asking that in return to them. I mean, a lot of times we put up our walls really quickly and say, yeah, but you did this and the way you're yelling at me, and we do all these things that to kind of distract from what the true case is. And on our side, if we treat every guest with empathy and grace, and they're giving us empathy and grace, I think we can do something really cool.
Every year, millions of attraction visitors lose hours in line instead of making memories.
Since its inception, Accesso's virtual queuing has saved more than 4.5 billion, yes, that is billion with a B, minutes of wait time, freeing guests to pack their day with more rides, eats, and excitement.
The result? Happier guests who spend more and a better bottom line for you.
Ready to turn waits into wins? Visit accesso.com/ROI clinic.
The queues are virtual. The results are real.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast.
Hey, Josh, how are you?
Hey, Matt, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
All right.
Yes, I've got a question for you.
Okay.
This may show our difference in age a little bit, but I'm not sure. Do you remember an advertisement for a soft drink that was called the Uncola?
Can you remind me what the soft drink was called?
I think it was, I don't remember, to be honest with you.
No, I don't. But I'm going to be looking it up right after this.
Me too. And the reason I bring this up is because our guest today, Evan Barnett from Pyek Group, operates water parks, and he calls their parks the unwater parks.
I do remember that. And he did reference a certain cell phone carrier, I believe it was T-Mobile, of branding themselves as the uncarrier. So while not the first to label themselves as the category, it feeds into the message of, he talked about a lot of the friction points or even some of the reputations that water parks historically have that Pyek Groups, and that, by the way, that's Pyek, Pyek Group, that their parks implement and really used to create an amazing guest and I would say employee experience as well.
Absolutely. He also talked a lot about cold, hard leadership, which as you listen to him and talk to him, it's not about being cold and mean. It's about kind of holding to standards and making sure people are accountable and balancing that with a lot of empathy as well.
And part of that too is being unoffendable. And that's one of their core values that Evan talks about, of the way that you can have conversations and to not be offendable, which I guess is kind of like water park, unoffendable. I don't know if those two tie in together directly, but he shares his mindset on what that means.
This might be the Attraction Pros episode. We don't know.
Might be.
But the last thing that kind of rounded out a lot of the conversation was he talked about doing the basics well. And so often in businesses, we have the foundation of what we're supposed to be doing. We have the basics. Are the hot things hot? Are the cold things cold? Are things clean? Is everything the way it's supposed to be? Are we doing that on a consistent basis? And that is our measure of success.
Yes. So should we get to this interview with Evan Barnett?
Let's undo it.
Hey, Evan, welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast. We are so excited to have you on today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I feel like we've got a lot to unpack here, but to kick this off, tell us about yourself. Tell us about your background, your career, and all that.
Josh, that's always a hard question. Tell me about yourself. I've never been good at doing that, but I always figure out what is it like to be on the other side of me, and it's chaotic. So, so first off, that's just kind of my personality. But in all truth about me, let's see. I'm born in Sacramento. I do like to say I'm a native Texan now. I've actually been in Texas longer than I've been in California. So I like to say I like to start with that, but. Have three kids and just love this industry and just happy to be blessed to be a part of this growing industry and just excited to be here.
And so, Evan, you started at 16, is that correct, in the industry?
I did. I started when I was 16, like most of us. I needed a job, and I had this passion for theme parks and attractions growing up in California with being so many around us. My parents exposed us to that at a young age, so I just always had this affinity. And one day at lunch, they set up a booth right in our lunch cafeteria, and there was Water World USA looking for employees. And I was like, like, why not? And I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. You do not want me as a cashier, and you certainly didn't want me as a lifeguard. So I work with my hands a lot. I like to see the work product pretty quick. So I applied to clean toilets and started doing that and found my home.
That's awesome. And then where'd you go from there?
So fortunately, I had an awesome mentorship at the facility itself. Unfortunately, my bosses, my individual supervisors were, as you guys know, at very young age. A lot of our supervisors are in this industry. They didn't last very long. So I got thrust into a leadership role pretty quickly that first year. And so I was just in that park services kind of era, and my supervisors got out and they kind of thrust me into that position. So I got thrust into learning what leadership looks like, feels like, the woes of it, the successes of it, and just kind of stayed for many years in park services, kind of got moved around through different departments. In the attraction pro community, you guys would know that in the water park world, park services and water safety generally have this deep divide. And they sometimes collaborate and sometimes they don't, and those that blood runs deep. So I took a unique course and dove from park services to water safety and crossed to the other side, if you will, and had success bridging that gap and learning really quickly that lifeguards do a lot more than it looks like from the front lines. So got to jump into that and learn that role and just kind of continued from there. And luckily, I had really good mentorship who just put me under their wing and learned the craft of what leadership looks like and just stayed in it through my college career.
And so now, as the president of Peak Group, you're leading a lot of people, and there's a lot of responsibility that you have. What are some of those early leadership lessons that you're still using today?
I'm glad you talked about kind of this leading this conglomerate. We have four parks in three different markets with two brands and one entity called Peak Group. And so, how do you keep all that together? And I would say the lessons I've learned to do that early on have really come from the roots of just starting. I remember my first day of work. I mean, first off, we get an opportunity to you always remember your first job. I'm sure you guys remember your first job, and I take that kind of that flag, if you will, to heart. So a lot of people are working for us for that first time. My first day wasn't really so good. They said, "Hey, here's a bathroom by the wave pool. Go clean it." And in my world, I'm like, I'm going to clean it. So I'm like with a toothbrush cleaning out the grout. Just really getting into it. And my boss comes around the corner and he's like, "What is taking you so long?" And just starts kind of getting on to me. And here I am trying to be this employee doing a really good job. I realized really quickly that you got to give people the tools, you got to give people the benefit of the doubt, you got to give some direction, you got to recognize the ambition. And sometimes, perception is reality. His perception was I was just being lazy, and my perception was I was trying to do a really good job. And so, if you take those principles and kind of meld them together to today, I still use that. You got to give people resources. You got to understand that perception is reality, sometimes is not reality, and you got to ask a lot of questions. What's going on? Maybe it's your fault. And to today, in within all lines of Peak Group, I still use that, remember that day one mentality, and try to be consistent with it.
That's so fascinating. I remember kind of a similar experience. I was an operations supervisor. We were setting up for an event. There were all the barricades, and I asked two team members. I said, will you wipe down the barricades? Like the event team, they loaded in like onto the stage, and like some dust went everywhere, and like just needed it to be like cleaned off. And I came back like 30, 45 minutes later, and they were on, I think, like the third barricade, like deeply scrubbing into it. So that story of you cleaning the bathroom and saying, "Hey, I want to do a great job at this. I'm going to show you how great of a job I can do." Like you said, as a leadership, you need them give them the tools and the direction of saying, "Okay, you don't need to clean the grout with the toothbrush. It needs to be presentable. It needs to be clean and ready for guests and all that." And kind of matching in with the efficiency. That was just what that story reminded me of. I do want to go back to one of the things that you said, and I'm wondering if we can expand on this here, is the occasional collision or the deep divide between park services and water safety team. What is that like?
Growing, and we kind of see it, sense it today too, and it's really important. Sometimes you will really operate in these silos, and everyone has different objectives and goals. And to understand what the mission is across all departments is really important. And if the mission isn't really clear, sometimes each department feels like the other department is trying to take too much, or that pull and that give, that conflict, that friction. As iron sharpens iron, sparks fly, right? And so you got to handle those individual sparks as they are created. And for back in the day, water safety is trying to provide a really good, safe park, and the park service is trying to find a very clean park. And at the end of the day, all the guests leave, and we asked water safety to help clean up the park because now the park is completely trashed. And as you're going from break or to stand, when you see a piece of trash, you pick it up. Park services sometimes doesn't understand the goal of what water safety did, and water safety doesn't understand the goal of park services. And sometimes that divide just gets really deep. And so sometimes you got to back up and realize that, hey, we're all on the same team. We're all here for the same goal, which is that guest experience. And if you can bake that early on by simply saying, hey, it's everyone's responsibility to pick up trash, for example, and just make that part of your lifeline, your blood, from orientation to area training to the interview process, that, hey, whose job is to pick up trash? It's everybody's. Those walls start breaking down. And it's to realize that everyone's goal, it really is the same. It's just how you get there is different. And so that those divides, we deal with them daily. I mean, I see them today. It's just time tradition, and you kind of make, you kind of have to you gamify it a little bit, and we put competition in there as well. So it's not all negatives, and there's a lot of positive that can come out of that as well.
But I think you bring up a good point about really being clear about the vision and where you're trying to go, and the fact that you may have multiple departments that do very, very different things, but you're all trying to get to the same goal. I know I grew up in an amusement park, and it was operations and maintenance. We were supposed to be working together, and a lot of times we were, but there were times when we butted heads also, because maintenance didn't like what the ride operators were doing, and ride operators didn't like what maintenance was doing, and we didn't really see that we were trying to go in the same direction. So I think that mindset kind of translates into a lot of different departments. So I love that you shared that. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I call it mission focused. You got to keep it mission focused, and I think once everybody realizes that, hey, we're all on the same team here, right? It really helps bring everyone together and move in the right direction. It's tough. It's cold, hard leadership is really what it is, and it's listening and understanding, and just realizing, hey, give the other guy the benefit of the doubt.
So to expand on that, what are some things that you do with Peak to keep things mission focused and all departments aligned and on the same team
I,
and on the same page?
I think at the core of it is what we were kind of talking about, is this vision. You got to make sure that you're over communicating what the vision is, at each different area of the business. I mean, at the end of the day, we have different brands, we have different environments, we have different communities. All these things you're constantly getting pulled at, right? Is change management, and just cold hard, cold turkey leadership, meaning just applying those principles of just being people focused, and making people understand generally what direction we're going. We're all rolling in that direction, And at the end of the day, it's to make sure that that guest that comes in is leaving with a smile. It's not about competition with ourselves. That's the one thing we need to not do is create friction that's not needed. And so that's one thing we do is that really that vision based. I would say on the backside of it is really on the frontline leadership side is how do you break down barriers and how do you break down communication lines? And it's very, very difficult. But if you do that early on, I'm talking like subtle things from your job application to the way they're communicated to get the job, the way the interview process is, the way your orientation is, the way area training, all the way up to day one ready. All those subtle things start building this picture. And all of a sudden, you're taking a guest money, you're doing a transaction, you're like, man, I actually am equipped, I have been trained. And that just, I'm going to call that momentum building. It's like this big snowball. And all of a sudden in July, you're looking back going, wow, we have something pretty special here. But it takes hard work to get there. So, hope I answered
Well,
that.
yeah, no, and you kind of answered a question that I wanted to ask, which is, going based on your story of how you started and Josh's story, how he started, and thinking back to my first job, wanting to do a good job, but then in so many places we see, people that have been there for a while and they're not as enthused about doing a great job. They're not in the bathroom with a toothbrush anymore. They're barely doing the minimum. And so, like I said, you kind of answered that in terms of that momentum that we have to put into it. It's the leadership, it's the specific vision that we have. And I'm wondering if there's anything else that you would put into that equation to keep that excitement and that enthusiasm that people have for a new job and wanting to do the best they can, keeping that all the way through a season or a number of years that they're working with you.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's not easy. One of my I love to say that if it was easy, everyone would do it, right? It's not easy. It is very hard to deal with mass amounts of I'm going to call them entry level workforce that works for a short amount of time, and to kind of use your phrase as how do you keep them engaged and captivated? I would say inherently, I feel like everybody wants to do a good job. I really do. At the core of it, I believe that everyone generally wants to do a good job, at least the masses, right? And then you have your edge cases that really distract you. And so I would say 80%, maybe even higher, want to do a good job, and then your 20 to 30%, depending on where you're at, are distractors. And what we do as leadership, we focus on what? The very loud edge cases. We're always on the fringes and we're not dealing with the 80%. And so on our side, I really try to encourage everybody, hey, let's try to manage and mitigate these edge cases really quickly. We don't have a lot of time in our industry. Focus on the 80% that want to be there, that are doing a good job, that generally want to show up and are trying to take that toothbrush. If you pour into them, the others, the edge cases, generally will figure out, hey, this is not a place for me, and they kind of fix themselves. And it's you have to be dedicated to that mission because you can get distracted so quickly with all the noise. But I found a lot of success just doing that, just flipping it where you're dealing with the 80, hey, you're doing a good job, high-fiving, giving out high five awards, doing all those little things that really create this bridge, if you will. Because I do inherently believe people want to be recognized, they want to be heard, they want to be seen, they want to do a good job. And once you give them a taste of that, they generally that momentum kind of tracks, the gears click.
Yeah. So we talked about mission, vision. I think it's naturally kind of a good segue and talk about core values. And I know that Peak has some unique core values, and I'm wondering if we can dive into that a little bit.
We do, totally. Yeah, as you guys probably have heard through, even on Traction Pros, core values are essential to getting that vision kind of captured, right? We have five main core values from kindness to can-do mentality. And the one I really want to hone in on that we have is it's called unoffendable. And there's a book by Brant Hansen. It's called Unoffendable. And if you guys haven't read it, I encourage your listeners to read it. But it really hones in on be unoffendable. Man, hey, I want people to come to me and say, Evan, that bathroom, yeah, you probably could have done a little bit better job. And here's what it looks like. And instead of, giving venom back, say, man, I really appreciate you caring enough to even tell me, thank you, and give you the opportunity to remediate our culture, if you will, our environments that we work in generally are we're always offended. And in our meetings, sometimes we fire each other. Like we say, hey, we're gonna fire ourselves. We walk out of the meeting, come back in with a new mindset. And how do we approach things? And if you can have that unoffendable mindset and not weaponize it, I think that's another key point. Don't, hey, I'm gonna tell you something very hard that's very direct and probably uncalled for. That's weaponizing it. You can't weaponize this unoffendable, or it becomes dangerous. But um, I really thought and think that being unoffendable within all ranks of our organization has really made us who we are, and be a change agent really quick. We pivot on a dime because we have this open communication and say, hey guys, I don't know what happened, but we didn't win today. We just didn't. And here's why. This department, this department, this department. You guys need to fix these things and tighten them up a little bit. And tomorrow we all kind of engage and do that, and knowing that our best interest is at heart. We're not trying to be mean or jerks or all of those things. So we take our core values on our sleeve. We wear them proudly, and they are pretty direct and very one word. They're really not this philosophy. It's really, let me back up. Our our core values are not aspirational. Either you are or you aren't. And
Mm.
either you are kind or you're not kind. We don't want you to aspire to be kind. We want you to be kind. And I hope that kind of centers the conversation about our core values.
Absolutely, it does. And I haven't read that book, Unoffendable, but now it's going to be on my list. But one word that comes to mind as you're describing it is empathy, right? Being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And one of the things that I find that I think of now is that if something might offend me or something might, not, it kind of rubs me the wrong way, I'm now getting into the practice of saying, well, that person's just trying to do their job. As much as I want to do mine, they're just trying to do theirs. So is empathy part of that practice?
Very much so. I think, empathy is in grace. I'm going to use the word grace, is give grace. I don't, with any relationship I'm generally in that's close, I don't think they're trying generally inherently to make me upset. I give them grace, right? You got to seek to understand before being understood, as you guys know, one of the seven habits. Try to understand what's going on. Maybe they're just, I don't know, they had a hard day coming in. Just give grace. And here's why. Because I extend grace. I need grace all the time. I make mistakes all the time, and I want that same grace given to me. So I give it in return. And I like the word empathy. That's how I define that word empathy, is just, extend it to myself as well as a leader. If you're following me, I need a lot of grace and a lot of empathy. And together we're going to do something really good, really awesome. We have to have that leeway, that room to make mistakes and realize that, hey, it's all in good faith.
What does empathy or grace and kind of those combined maybe look like in action so that they don't become, like you say, aspirational, don't become kind of a buzzword, but are truly something that there are kind of like concrete bullet points or steps of saying like, okay, this is how this looks like truly in practice and the results from that.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about it instead of internal. I'm going to talk about it external. I'm going to talk about it with guests. Guests, they come in our house every day, and they're trying to have an experience, right? And sometimes we fail in that experience, and it could be we didn't enforce a rule, we didn't give them hot food, our lines are too long. There's several things that happen that interrupt their day, and when they bring those to our attention, we have to show empathy and grace, because we're asking that in return to them. I mean, a lot of times we put up our walls really quickly and say, yeah, but you did this and the way you're yelling at me, and we do all these things that to kind of distract from what the true case is. And our side, if we treat every guest with empathy and grace, and they're giving us empathy and grace, I think we can do something really cool called hospitality. It's the way you make them feel. It's not the service. And I think when you combine those two things, when that guest is coming to you, you have an ability to really remediate an issue and rectify their day really quickly by giving them, hey, maybe they are telling the truth. In their eyes, we did this. In their version of what happened, we did this. And regardless if I agree with it or not, we extend that grace or empathy and try to remediate. And now if you were to flip that internally, we do the same thing with employees. I do the same thing with coworkers. vendors. I think vendors are the certainly unforgotten heroes in all of our business. They're the ones that keep everything going. You got to give them grace when they can't deliver something, right? Or empathy, and all those things combined, that give and take, that pull, those forces can make a day from good to great.
And so, as you talk about sort of your internal teams and you're thinking about the grace that you're extending and the empathy, I really am seeing a picture of it starting with you and starting with your leadership team, and then, kind of branching out into everybody else, your frontline teams, your frontline leaders, and then certainly out to the guests. And so that can be a challenge too, right? To get that vision through all those different layers of the organization.
Yeah, I always say it's 1,000 conversations. It's caught, not taught. They want to see you in action. If you're saying one thing and then behind the scenes you're contradicting yourself, or you're in behind the scenes you're spreading drama and rumors, and they're saying, "Man, if Evan's not in the room, is he saying this about me?" It's all those things. It's 1,000 things that come together, and it's cold hard character. It's leadership. It's I like to surround myself with people that are so much better than me, and they just are in all their rights. And I like to surround myself with people that generally are a little bit more direct, because I inherently am an indirect person. So putting people around me that are direct, it forces me to be good and hone in on my communication. And so to your point, it's bringing all those things together. That caught not taught really helps um, carry that message throughout your organization at all levels.
So, Evan, I want to switch gears here for a second because there is something I want to ask you about. I've heard you refer to Peak's water parks as unwater parks, and would love to know what that means if we could dive into that.
Hey, well, first off, any T-Mobile fans out there, I'm a big T-Mobile guy. Always, just recently switched. I've always been on the skirts watching T-Mobile. And I just really love what their message is. And so if I can, back in the day, 10, 12 years ago, the cell phone business was a lot different. You had contracts, you had, minutes. So you guys would check your minutes on texting. It was the most expensive way to communicate was text, because you would get charged for text, all that. And what happened was, T-Mobile came in and said, "Hey, we're going to be the uncarrier. We're going to do everything that the big guys aren't. We're going to have no contracts, unlimited service. We're going to figure out a way to buy out your contracts and bring you in." They just did the opposite of the big guys. And if you can carry that message over to the water park, generally, I've been doing this a long time, and you have neighbors and friends and fans, and there's a lot of detractors, that people that don't like water parks. When you ask them, "Well, why don't you like water parks?" You already have your fans. So I'm going to talk to the people that aren't your fans. They have this core belief that, hey, they're dirty, bad food, bad service, it's hot, all those things that prevent people from coming. Well, when we came onto the circuit in Houston, we're hot. We're a big, fourth largest city in the United States. There's all these things coming at you. If you, how are you gonna, where are you gonna stake your flag? Like, how are you gonna make an impact? And the unwater park is exactly that. We're everything the big guys aren't, if you will, kind of tongue-in-cheek vision. But we're gonna have good food and good service and good customer service. We're gonna be extremely hyper clean. All those things that those detractors view water parks as not being attract the masses, and it just kind of centers everybody. So we want to be the unwater park. So in all of our meetings, it's like, well, is it uber clean? Is it really good food? Is it a really good staff? And if we're hitting those pillars, we're the unwater park, if you will. And so that's kind of we kind of yeah, our foothold on.
And that kind of reminds me of something that we discussed at the, before we actually started recording, where you said the water park piece is easy, the people part is difficult. And I know we've talked a lot about the people part at this point, but you've got to oversee it all. So again, kind of from that 30,000-foot view, how do you balance the people part, the water park part, the guest part, like keeping all of that sort of in your view?
Great question. I go back to I'm not a huge sports analogy guy, but I love this sports. And I'm kind of a Cowboys, America's team, right? I lived in Dallas for a long time, and the Cowboys won 3 Super Bowls back to back to back with Troy Aikman as the quarterback. And he was being interviewed once. He said, "Man, so how did you guys win all these Super Bowls? I mean, the pinnacle of where your career, right?" He goes, "Man, here's what his answer was. I do the basics really well. You just do the basics really well. And a lot of people don't they overstretch, right? And they forget about doing the basics. And that's what we do. At the core of it, we want to do the basics really well. People want, smiles, they want good food, they want cleanliness, they want just good hospitality. They want all those things. They want frictionless experiences where you come in. And I always think about what Troy Aikman said. He could have said a good lineman, he could have all these. At the core of it, we focus on the basics. And that's my message. So we really want to make sure that every day we reset, we have a good attitude. That when the next person asks where the lockers are, we act like it's the first time we heard where the lockers are. It's hard to do. There's power in the mundane. And if you guys can do the mundane over and over and over again, you create this I'm almost going to call it this brand that takes on its own personality because you're so good at delivering the same experience over and over again. And those are through the basics.
Would you agree that by doing the basics really well, that the definition of basics might change over time as maybe the floor raises up a little bit?
I do, and consumer preferences change. I think the way we lead our teams change, their inputs and the way their environments they're used to working when they come into your environment changes quite a bit with, for example, cell phone use and how we communicate schedules and all those things. I agree, but at the core of it, they still want um, they still want to be trained. They still want to be treated with respect. They still want to be seen. They still want the very basic approaches that people forget that, hey, they chose you to work at. They could have worked anywhere. They could have worked at 1,000 other places that are hiring, and they chose you. And I take a lot of honor in that. And so now what are you going to do to indoctrinate them, right? How are you going to bring them on and navigate them through your organization? And I think as those ever changing, I'm going to call them standards increase, at each level, there's a basic, right? For example, orientation. You need to orient your employees, very basic. But the way you communicate that, what we've noticed is they consume our youth or our team members consume information so differently. They're used to watching Instagram and YouTube Shorts and TikTok. It's very short, very 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 bite-sized integration. When you sit them in an auditorium and talk to them for an hour, hour and a half, and then they leave, and you will interview them. Hey, so what did you learn? It, it's surprising what they did not retain. It really is. And so, to your point, orientation's a basic, but it's evolving. So, how are you going to communicate within that realm? We're test sampling some things with training videos that we're pushing out to them, and going to their level of how they consume information. But at the core of it's still that engagement. We're just really trying to be good at that.
So, Evan, I'm so glad you've mentioned a couple times how kind of the human experience hasn't changed. We want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to do purposeful work. But the things around that have evolved. Maybe not changed 100%, but evolved, over time. And certainly since you started at 16 years old, you've seen a lot of changes and evolutions over the years. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you've seen and how those have maybe changed the way you do things, or maybe they haven't changed the way you do things?
Yeah, I think to your point, I would say the 16's the new 20-year-old. They to keep them engaged and keep them relevant and to keep them within they learn so fast. What's I remember coming to work, it was like I needed a test and they learn so fast. They consume information so quick. They get these scheduling systems so fast where we're like, well, we got to over communicate the scheduling system. You just say, hey, we're working with this system. They got it. They're good. So I would say that there's that employee side of it. On the industry side, how we interact, consumer tastes and preferences are always changing. And what we've noticed kind of that common denominator throughout is they still want an experience. And however, whatever that experience is make sure that experience is very consistent throughout. And I would say that from the water park side, water parks are fairly new. I don't want to say that they've been around for a long, long time, but they've been there for some time now. And if you look at like the bowling industry and go-karts and mini golf and carousels, I mean, they've been around a long time. And I think water parks have proved that they have this, I'm going to call them base longevity now, like wave pool, lazy river, slides. They're going to be here for a long time. I think in the industry's proven that. Where's it going to go from here? You've seen the bowling alley evolve. You guys been bowling lately? I mean, it's a completely different experience from when we're kids. It's amazing, and I do think the water park is going to evolve there somehow, some way. And I think what Peak Group, what we're really trying to do is, I don't want to say on the leading edge of that, but I do want to say that we're really trying to be consistent with whatever that taste and preferences wants to be. And what we've noticed is they just want convenience, they want and quality. And how do you provide that at a value that they're willing to pay? And I think what we've noticed is just trust and brand. And once they trust you, man, they're willing to come back over and over again and buy that season pass, and they trust you with their family time. And as you guys know, time is very it's a scarcity, it's a scarce thing. And so when they trust you for that family time, it is really cool what you can do within that environment and how you can entertain them.
Yeah. It's interesting because trust is also one that could become kind of a buzzword, but the way that you just very succinctly put that, they trust you with their very limited family time, your discretionary time, your discretionary dollar, so many alternative options that they could have done aside from coming to one of your parks. So it's when they come visit, the guest is inherently saying, I trust you to validate my decision in coming to visit and making this decision today. Uh, that ties in with something that I've heard you say before that would love to touch on here. And you've said that your team focuses your conversations more on guest experience than you do on revenue and per cap. And I'm curious, why is that? Why is it more productive to have a business conversation focused on guest experience being prioritized over revenue?
Good question. We were having a meeting once, and it kind of dawned on me. How you could pull up Google Earth these days, and you can look over your park, and you can kind of have the conversations of just overview of as a playbook if your park is, if you will, like on a whiteboard. And I realized, anybody can just pull up our park, literally, and go build that park. You can buy the same slides. You can build the same lazy river, the wave pool. You literally can get pretty close if you had the funds and the land and all those things. But what you can't do is you can't mimic the experience. You can't mimic the people. You can't mimic the culture. You can't mimic the community involvement and how we've created this special little entity you have in our little, in Houston. It's very hard to do that. And those of you who have run businesses, when you have that, it's special. And that I'm going to call that guest experience. And when you have everything working together outside of just slides, lazy rivers, water park, you need those. We kind of talked about those staples. But when you overlay it with the guest experience, now you have something. Now you have a brand. Now you have something to talk about. Now you have something to kind of put out there on the ether that's saying, "Hey, come visit us." Why? Because we're awesome. And here's why we're awesome. And we're going to repeat that over and over and over again. And that's guest experience. If you just focus on opening the gates, closing the gates, and putting the slides in, I mean yeah, that'll last for a little bit, but the longevity of that, in my experience, has been shortcoming. It's a shortfall because the next guy is going to come in and they're going to create an experience with smaller lazy rivers, not as cool wave pools, smaller slides, and they're going to go, well, why is everybody going over there? It's because the way they feel when they go there. It's the overall guest experience. You leave, you guys have been wherever your favorite coffee shop is or whatever it is. When you leave, you go, man, I like that place. I'm not exactly sure why. But when you start thinking about it, it's, oh, I like my barista. I like how they do this to me. I like how they write my name on the cup. I like how I just feel with the music in there. All those things come to place. And now it's like, this is Matt Heller's coffee shop. This is my coffee shop. It's not there. It's mine. And if you can change that through experience, I think you're onto something.
I really love that concept of me owning a coffee shop, although it would be a tea shop, but that's okay. Um, but I love the idea of, somebody coming in and saying, this is mine, not in a possessive way, but in a, I feel at home here. I feel like this is someplace I should be. So, thinking about the parks that you operate, are there specific things that your team members are doing to help people feel that way in terms of the guest experience, or are you really relying on their personality, or is it a combination of both, like in terms of preparing them to create that experience for your guests?
I think it's a combination of both. Internally, to be real, it's very, very hard to be. We start a business, stop a business, start a business, stop a business, and that continuity from year over year gets very difficult. So each year, I feel like it has its new kind of vibe, if you will, and you're trying to protect that vibe as much as you can. I would think for us, it's hiring right. It's, being very cautious about who you hire, then training who you hire effectively, and then giving them the tools to express themselves and be their own personality. We really want them to, not their uniform to be their personality. We want their smiles and their eyes and the way they communicate and the way they interact, and give them the tools to remediate guest service, all those type things. Throughout our training is I'm going to call them basic tools that we want to do and give. But at the end of the day, it's really who you hire that really makes or breaks that experience. And we've kind of honed in on that. Even going into our 2026, some people talk about what new attractions we're putting in, and sometimes I look at ourselves and I'm going, guys, are we just being too basic, if you will? But we're really focusing on how we recruit. I mean, we're really looking at how we recruit and how we're training our individuals, because I don't want them to be good in July. I need them to be good on day one. And when July happens, you have 3 more weeks and then you're closed. And so how do we do that? And I don't have the answer except that we're trying, and we try and we try again. And I think people can sense that personality when we're in front of all of our team members, that, hey, I like those guys. I want to buy into that. And I'm willing to give up going to wherever it may be, family vacation or wherever, because they need me. I don't. I got it. They need me here. I'm going to do this, and that's what we've kind of sensed over the years is they're partners. They're in it with you. They're willing to not just call in sick to go over here or go to the mall with their friends, but they're going, man, I'm letting my supervisor down if I do that, which really translates to that guest experience. So. And then one more thing is kind of, fans first, right? The Savannah Banana kind of the
Yeah.
approach to that fan first approach is, do our fans really want this, or do we just want this for our fans? And those are some hard questions, because we put things in place that nobody really wanted and that we just thought that they wanted. And really, going back to the drawing board and saying, what are the things people really want? And then 10x that, make that really big and awesome for them.
So I've got to ask, do you have an example of something that you put in place because you said we want this for our fans, but the fans didn't want it from you?
Yeah, one example that comes off my head was virtual queuing. We're like, man, it's gonna be great. Everyone's gonna want a virtual queue. They don't have to wait in line. They can go play in the lazy river and the wave pool and our activity pools and play water volleyball. They can do all these activities outside of waiting in line, because people don't want to wait in line. We put this virtual queue system in, and they just rejected it. They didn't they when they wanted to go on that slide, they wanted to get in line. They were happy to wait, and we're thinking this whole time they didn't want to wait in line, but they didn't mind. They wanted to wait in line and you know uh, engage with their family and talk to dad about what they're doing. They wanted that space to do that rather than just always run, 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 run. And it was one of those kind of moments that we had to look at ourselves and go, hey, I know we spent a lot of time on this. I know this was going to be one of those technology pieces that we thought everyone was going to engage in, and it just wasn't. And so from now on, we kind of look through this new filter of, do they want it? Do they really want it? And it was some good resources that we put behind it too, and communication styles. And when you say yes to something, you're saying no to 10 other things. And we said no to a lot of things to put that virtual queue in. And it just is a kind of a reminder in our meetings. Is this a virtual queue conversation, or are we actually going somewhere with it?
Yeah. No, I think it's great to be able to kind of focus on things like, do people really want this, or are we kind of chasing our tail a little bit, or just chasing a trend that might be out there? So, Evan, this has been an amazing conversation. We've covered so much in a very short period of time, but I've got one last question for you, and that is, what advice do you have for people that are coming up through the industry that are looking to be executives at a water park, theme park, any kind of attraction? What sort of kind of advice do you have for them?
That's awesome. I would say, stick with it first off. For my overall arching is, again, I said it before, but if it was easy, everyone would do it. This business is so rewarding. It is tough. It is very tough business, but it is so rewarding. My advice from the get-go is be an idiot. And I know that sounds kind of harsh, if I can explain it, but be the idiot in the room. If you don't know, ask questions. And what I've noticed when I'm the idiot in the room and everyone else around me, I find myself following other people. And in order to be a really good leader, you need to learn how to be a really good follower. And then being that kind of curiosity first person and learning and not having to be the guy that has all the answers allows you the space to be a really good follower. So when your team thrusts you into that leadership role, you know how what following looks like, so you can be a really good leader. And if you can master that, you don't have to apply for positions. People just thrust you into them. They want you to lead them.
That's awesome. That is great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that and for everything that you've shared over the course of this interview. This has just been so fascinating. And as we start to wind this down here, if people want to learn more about Peak Group or if they want to get a hold of you directly, where would you send them?
First, go to peakgroup.com. You can see our general information there. My email is evan.barnett@peakgroup.com. We're going to be at IAPA. Happy to meet with we always say every opportunity is worth one meeting. So just love to shake your hand and say hello.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I know I'm looking forward to running into you at IAPA and can't wait for that. So, Evan, thank you again so much for your time. And for everybody out there who's watching and listening, just remember, we are all attraction pros.